all the facilities for Aqueduct, Belmont, and Saratoga. But prior to that, I was the VP of Facilities and Surfaces for the Maryland Jockey Club with Laurel, Pimlico, and Bowie. Prior to that, 13 years up at Suffolk Downs up in Boston, and started my career at Monmouth Park in New Jersey. Come from a horse show background. My father was a veterinarian, grew up on a horse farm in New Jersey, so I've been around horses my entire life. And I think that's one of the passions that I have with this job. And when I was asked or invited to come over here, the comparison with this track compared to what we have at any of the locations that I've worked is the winter racing and the limestone base. Some of the maintenance procedures that are currently used here certainly vary from what we use in New York and the type of implements that are used, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But I'd just like to start that, you know, the key point is starting from the ground up and the base of the racetrack that's put in here, the drainage and the quality control on what's taking place currently at this track means everything. We ran into this experience down at Laurel, and luckily the Stronach Group was able to let us redo that track after putting almost $14 million into it, that the turf course had to be torn up and redone because the steps weren't taken correctly when it was being built, and they allowed us to put the drainage in and put the track together so it could be a first-class turf course. Again, I was only here this morning to look at the work that's taken place, looking at it from an overview. The materials that are currently being used look consistent with what we would use in New York. The drainage, it's certainly a plus and a big improvement from what was on the old track with the lateral drainage. Looking at the perimeter drain, I'll get into what we did at Laurel or at Aqueduct and Belmont. The materials with the drainage layer, your weather here is consistent to what we have in New York. So the cold, the freeze thaw cycles, it's what we work with as well. I know there's some issues as far as trying to locate either the perfect sand that's natural sand or manufactured sand, as well as what you have available for your silt and your clay and getting that cushion. I would just be conservative with what you're looking for, because there's not one perfect cushion that's going to maintain this racetrack year round. There's no way that a track that responds correctly in July and August when it's very warm and sunny and windy is going to work for you the last week in December when it's freezing cold and the ground is frozen. So there has to be that ability to be able to amend this cushion. And I think that's one of the key points that we've worked with Dr. Peterson on, is the testing of the soils to be able to know what we're looking for at the time of the year. And when we go through our maintenance procedures that we do at our tracks and what we look for, they're amended constantly. We'll add silt, we'll add clay, we've got 3 different types of sand that are on site at the 2 winter tracks for the training center at Belmont and also for the racetrack at Aqueduct. Going through here, I would just say that should be a key point with the, speaking with the trainers, with the jockeys, what everybody's looking for, because just the little interaction that I've had, you hear that the track was very good at one point in the year, another point in the year it was very cuppy and needed a bunch of water. Again, without knowing it or seeing it, it's not fair for me to say how the track reacts or what changes need to be made on it. What I would say is, if you can pass around what we did at Aqueduct, and I'll just give a brief overview of what Aqueduct is. It was a start to finish reconstruction of a new turf course and a new main track. We ripped out the old winter track that had a 14-inch limestone base with interior drainage around the inside of the track that was clogged solid, that hadn't worked in probably 15 years. So to look at what work was done there, we talked about the main track that was a clay-based track. We ripped out part of the sub-base on that, meaning 6 inches of clay that went out of there, put 12 inches of limestone on, new interior drainage that was tied to the existing catch basins, perforated sock with this similar drainage system or tile that's being installed here, new cushion, new safety rail, as well as in this time period, rebuilding the new turf course, stripping out all the existing sand that was there, going from the designed base, putting in 12 inches of drainage sand, 9 inches of growing medium, and then a new irrigation system. We did that all in 5 months. We started May 1st, and the first horse was training on the track on September 7th, or September 6th, I should say. So with what work is taking place over here, you've got the luxury of, with the guys working out here now with lights and everything else and the work that's taking place, it can keep going. The one thing that I would say on this is the materials for what you're using are different from what I'm used to, accustomed to as far as the stone dust. And when one of the trainers that we spoke with today made a comment as far as how much material you're used to running on, we could never run on that, nor would I ever run on that much material in New York, because there's no way that you can properly maintain that material. If you look at where the equipment is going back and forth across the turf course to gain access to the track, it's a sea of mud, and to have equipment that's traveling on your cushion without being able to maintain the proper depth, you've got X number of inches of frozen cushion on the bottom, and then when the weather does warm up and the sun comes out, I don't know how this gentleman takes care of keeping a consistent cushion on the track. You know, what I'm accustomed to, and again, this is just my perspective on what we do and how we operate in the tracks that I've worked at and how it's done in the Northeast, again, which is a similar climate. There's a limestone base, there's a pad that's built over the base that's probably 3/8 to 3/4 of an inch at the most. Then off of that is your racing surface that's 4.5 inches. And that's what we run on. There's no 10 inches, there's no 9 inches, because on a rain event, that water gets into the track. Not everything is going off of the track. You're trapping X amount of water on every rain event into the track, that in your temperatures in the wintertime, if you race till January, that material is frozen on the track. It's gonna let go at some point. And to be able to control that, there's no way that anybody can. As far as how the track is laid out, how the sun hits it, if there's varying points on the track, I have no idea. I mean, with seeing it today, I just, you know, we walked the track and you know, again, got a brief overview of the construction process with what's taking place. The thing that, you know, going into, and should probably segment into some of the equipment if you wouldn't mind, because just like I said, with our discussion, it's not fair for me to judge or gauge on what's taking place here, because I'm not the one responsible for the racetrack. What you see in the pictures coming up are harrows and watering equipment and rollers that we use to maintain the track. So when you look at these harrows, as I mentioned, all these harrows ride right on the bottom of the track. That's the base of the racetrack that they're racing on, that the harrows are riding on, I should say. So you see it at Saratoga, you see it at Belmont, and that's how we operate. The harrow pins are always riding on the base of the racetrack. That's the only thing that you know that's consistent out there, is the base of the racetrack. Because when you're going through with these lift harrows or these tire harrows, if there's if a tractor turns or a water truck that turns, that harrow goes over and rides over it. So now there's an impression of another 1/2 inch or 3/4 of an inch of material. You multiply that through X number of races a day, there's a different point on the racetrack. And I'm sure as a jockey, you can tell where the tractors turn in and out of the track without any, you know, with your eyes closed. That's one of the things that we, you know, again, with the type of equipment that we use, we try and limit that exposure with the tractors turning without a harrow riding on the base. With the lift harrows, it's similar to, you know, again, padding the material and it being wavy, not staying consistent. The other thing that was brought up is, the floats over here are very good, and I took pictures of it because I'd like to model that after. It looks like a better design with what you currently have over here than what we're using at Belmont. The other thing is the moisture with going through. We roll the tracks every night in the wintertime, in the summertime. We lock whatever moisture we can into the track. We'll water on top of a rolled track, but anything that you can do to try and keep the moisture in the track is another maintenance procedure that we found to be very, very helpful. You're opening the track up in the morning. As long as the person who is opening the track can identify that they might have to harrow the track twice because it's rolled, but it's a hell of a lot cheaper to pay one guy to harrow the track in the morning than 4 hours of watering in the afternoon in the sun. So again, it's not fair for me to judge without seeing the maintenance procedures and how it's done. I'm just giving you an example of what we do and how it works for our operation. The other thing, what you'll see in the water trucks, that's fine. Our boom trucks, we're never riding, the tires are never on an area where the horses are racing. So you'll see, if you watch the races from any of the NYRA tracks, there'll be a water truck on the outside that just sprays with a fan to go where either the chase ambulance or the veterinarian is traveling during the races. But inside where the horses are running, there's always a boom truck, so that way horses are never traveling over tire marks from the equipment. The only tire marks that they're traveling over is from the tractors. We also have the single float and a double float. All that is to pack the track down on a wet condition, whether it's a sloppy or a muddy track, and it's a difference of probably 3,500 pounds. So the double float we'll use when the track has got a good rain, when it's packed down tight, and we know that we're going to be floating all day. The single float is what we'll use the initial time to go over, so we're not pushing material all around the track. It gets the track set down smooth, so that way the heavier plate can go over top of it and pack it down. The roller, this green track packer, well, we've got 9 of those. I mean, that's probably, since I've started in this in New York, we've added to each of the tracks just because that is a critical element for if there's a rain event coming. We use it in the wintertime if there's snow coming, so we can pack the track down to remove the snow quickly. The graders are going out there, the snow blowers are going out on a track that's flat, that's packed. We'll put salt into the track so we know that the track won't freeze, but at least when the graders and the snow blowers are going out there, they're going over an even and smooth, consistent surface. You're not wasting sand by blowing sand off of the track. It just makes it a much, much simpler operation for snow removal. But like I mentioned earlier, the key component for that piece of equipment is either prepping for rain or keeping moisture into it. And I can't say enough about how that's helped our tracks to be able to roll the tracks and keep either moisture in or out. If you could go back to the other side, if you wouldn't mind, thanks. The other thing that you'll see is the depth of our cushion, but we also do moisture sampling every day. So unless it's a sloppy track and it's too wet to measure, we'll go out with a probe at every marker pole and do 5 different samplings across the track. This is tied into GPS as well as it's a downloader to our software, our maintenance system, that will show what the moisture content is at any point in the track. So again, it's another tool that we're able to say, so if somebody would mention, say, well, the quarter pole seems wetter than another area, or the quarter pole seems drier than another area. We've got 2 drains at one of our tracks that are at either end. One's at 6 furlongs, one's at the quarter pole. Those areas always dry much faster than the other components of the other parts of the racetrack because of the material that's pulled there and the water that goes off of there. So our silt and clay levels at those 2 areas are less. We're able to go back on a sheet and show these 2 areas have a different moisture content. Then we'll go through and we'll do a soil analysis. We'll see that we're down X number of percentage of silt or X number percentage of clay. That's where the luxury of having the spreader and the materials here. So when you're putting material out, if you see an inconsistency in the track, The jocks might not be able to notice it, the trainers might not be able to see it, but the equipment doesn't, the numbers don't lie. And that's it takes me going out with my hands and putting it in the soil and saying, well, I think this is it. That's by the wayside now. You know, now the science has come into this where it shows actually what's taking place on the track. The other thing that we've done in New York is I have to deal with a bunch of unions. So dealing with the unions, I don't always have the best quality employees working for me that care about the job that they're doing. Some of them, I hate to say, are there for a paycheck and not for the love of the game or the love of the sport. So we put GPS on the tractors, we put GPS on the water trucks. So when we're going through and mapping out what these areas are for moisture content, we're able to see that Johnny, who drives water truck 124, Johnny's slow to start. Well, when Johnny's slow to start with the water truck, he's putting down 4 times the amount of water than what he should be putting out because the truck is slow moving rather than getting that boom truck up to speed and putting out water consistently on the track. Between the GPS and between the TDR probe, we're able to see those things and then have that conversation with Johnny on why you need to get the truck up to speed to put the water out uniformly on the racetrack. These are all tools that within the last 5 to 6 years working with Dr. Peterson have been very helpful to NYRA with all 3 of our racetracks. So this is what Dr. Sorry. This is what we have on a tablet for each of the foremen at each of our tracks, that they're able to input what we do for opening the track up for racing each day, what we do for inputting the information for even at the training track. You'll see what the graders do on the track, what type of harrow was used, what direction they're going, because again, at certain tracks, whether you go clockwise or counterclockwise, it impacts how the material gets left from the harrows when it turns off the track. So we want to try and, before training, we have the luxury of going a certain direction. During racing, with some of our shoot races at Aqueduct, we can't go that direction. So we try and alternate how the tractor's going to track, so we're not going the same way every time, leaving the material coming out of the chute in the same area, so the track's deep in a certain spot. Would you mind going back to the view maintenance? So, as I mentioned, this goes through on each one of our courses. We'll do the turf course, we'll do the dirt courses, we'll do the moisture samples on each. We'll also do the cushion depth, that on every marker pole, somebody is going through and manually going out and measuring the cushion depth, and this gets posted to the public so all the bettors see what the depth is of the cushion. The only time that we don't do that is when the track is too wet to be able to measure. So that's another thing that we're able to see, that at certain points on the track, on the turns as I mentioned, you know in front of the chute it always gets heavier there. So the grader operator will know when we're grading the track that they're taking more material in a certain area to try and get to a uniform depth of 4.5 inches. The other thing, would you mind going to the weather?
Yeah.
So this was another key point for us, is the weather, with being able to operate during winter racing. When we're going through and you're seeing when the track sets up or when the track is starting to ball up during racing, we can go down to the jock room, or the VP of racing and myself will talk to the jockeys that the wind chill is such, the wind speed is a certain amount, to be able to have that information. So it's not Glenn saying that, well, it's only -10 or it's only 10 above, I should say. We'd never race at -10, but it's 10 degrees. You have that information to be able to talk to the trainers, to be able to talk to the jockeys.
I started talking to a couple of trainers during the autumn. I will continue with that. So hopefully I will be able to meet all of the trainers down here and get an idea. So I can relate what you think about different surfaces in relation to what we measure. I will show you measurements from the same day we've had racing, for example, and we start discussing that. And I think my my vision, my idea about that is that we'll have a more joint way to speak about the surfaces, and it will be easier then to make the successive tuning we want of the surface. So that's another thing we should start out with. We will never be able to get a surface out there that everybody is satisfied with. Are you okay with that?
Yes.
Well, if you're not, we're not going any further.